You're just going to say they're all Ponzi's, aren't you? No, not this time. This is something different. Okay, let's hear it. Every crypto project out there, whether it's an NFT or a fungible token, tends to have one big problem in common. Can you guess what it is? Are you sure you're not about to call them all Ponzi's? I'm sure. The thing in common between all these projects is that they all have some kind of token. And the big lie, which is a big problem, is that these tokens are somehow necessary to make these crypto projects, or decentralized in particular. The bigger lie is the suggestion that these tokens help with decentralization. In fact, in most cases, they help with something totally different that most of these projects don't really want you to think about. How can you have a DAO without a token though? If you'd like to find out, keep watching. Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Tenner, aka Sombat, and in these videos I use my 15 years of experience as a successful entrepreneur working with hundreds of tech startup founders to bring some clarity to Web3 and NFTs. So when you look around crypto and Web3, it feels like everyone has a token. For a while, even NFT projects fell into the pattern of launching fungible tokens. And of course, the NFTs themselves are non-fungible tokens, so they're tokens too, and those NFT projects have twice the amount of tokens. Now, most of those projects present the tokens as essential, and in some few cases that's actually true. So I'm not trying to paint everyone with the same brush here, but in most cases the token actually does the opposite of what it claims to do. But how can it be a decentralized project without having a token? How would you even run it? And that's the first and biggest lie about tokens in crypto. The assertion that tokens are necessary for decentralized governance. It's a lie for multiple reasons. First of all, tokens are not a decentralizing force. They actually centralize projects. Think about it this way. Which project is easier to shut down? A project that exists as a group of people all around the world who are collaborating because they want to, using whatever tools they find, or a project whose direction is decided by a few dozen or maybe a few hundred holders of a token. What if those holders are all around the world? The tokens inherently create a concentration of decision power in the token holders. So they definitely don't serve the goal of making the project decentralized, even if the holders are all around the world. Even worse, you said those holders were all around the world, but the truth is, nobody really knows that. Governance tokens can easily be held in anonymous wallets, and so really you have no idea who is voting for what. A project could appear to be decentralized since it has a token distributed across many wallets, and yet be largely controlled by one entity. And there are rather too many examples of so-called DAOs holding votes that end up largely determined by just one voter who happens to show up. How is that decentralized? The next part of the lie is that the tokens help with governance. I mean, yes, technically they do, in the sense that the tokens are being used for governance by some of these projects. Though it's worth pointing out that in many cases, only lip service is paid to the so-called DAO decisions, which are still gated and controlled by a centralized team. That's especially true in NFTs. When I ran my company, Grant Tree, for 10 years, I really tried to decentralize power as much as possible, to engage everyone in making decisions and create non-hierarchical systems of governance. This is really hard. It's way harder than most people think. It's certainly not solved by having some kind of voting system to make critical decisions. Voting can be appropriate when most options are probably okay and making a mistake is not too expensive, though even there it's slower than other decision-making processes. Voting is an awful tool when some choices are really wrong and damaging. Like Brexit? Exactly. In those cases where making the wrong choice is really bad, you actually do want to find trusted experts and let them make the decisions. If a project is relying on votes to make those kinds of decisions, they are taking huge and unnecessary risks every time they make a big decision. Wait, what if they only use the voting for smaller decisions and leave the big ones to experts? It's an improvement in governance, maybe, but it's still awful governance. There's a good reason why governance best practices separate shareholders from the executive. You don't want shareholders to be evaluating every small decision people make in the course of day-to-day business. Shareholders should only ever make one decision. Do we fire the CEO and/or the board? This is important because in reality, most people already tend to have a bias against action. They spend ages discussing stuff rather than just making decisions and progress. When you add detailed day-to-day shareholder scrutiny to this mix, that's only going to make decision-making and therefore progress even slower. So tokens are not only not decentralizing, but they are also usually bad governance. But there's more. Having tokens that allocate control over the company is a vulnerability. What I mean by that is, A company with this sort of control structure can be taken over by a hostile acquirer. It's a weak point. Regular companies do that because that's the best model they found to balance control, fundraising, and profit sharing. The extra weakness is worth it since it brings those benefits, but it is a weakness. Now, most companies are not public, so it's unlikely that someone can just sneakily buy up their tokens and influence their direction. And public company disclosure laws mean that if someone buys more than 10% of another company, they are considered an insider and need to report that to the SEC, so everyone can know that this is happening. With token-based projects, there are no such requirements, and the anonymity of the space means someone could buy up the project, change its direction to something harmful without anyone being aware. That's a huge weakness of token-based governance as it currently stands. Okay, you got me, but if the tokens are bad governance and they don't actually help with decentralization and they create weakness, then why are they there? That's the billion-dollar question. Why indeed? You're about to say Ponzi, I can smell it. You're good, but not quite. I think it's even more fundamental than that. Dave, I'm going to ask you a question. Why did you get into NFTs and crypto? The truthful, honest answer. Well, I guess I wanted to make some money investing in things that seem kind of fun and worthwhile. Bingo. I suspect the main purpose of all those tokens is quite simply for making profits. See, the thing is, true decentralized and autonomous organizations aren't about making big piles of money. And most people who got into crypto in the last few years, well, they want to make money from it. And that's okay, but it doesn't mesh very well with the goals of decentralized autonomy. Look, maybe they just need time. There aren't any successful DAOs out there yet, with or without tokens. Yes, there are. A famous example which everyone knows about, and which true DAOs should aspire towards, is Alcoholics Anonymous. AA was started as a set of commandments, and some best practices around structuring meetings. Its creators made it open and let anyone adapt it however they wanted. Anyone can open an AA chapter, with or without its original founder's blessing. As a result, there are countless AA chapters around the world, and many variations like Narcotics Anonymous, Gaming Addicts Anonymous, and yes, of course, crypto and NFT related 12-step programs. Nobody really knows how many, they're all around the world, and even if you want to shut down 12-step programs, it is practically impossible to do. AA is a true DAO, and there's no token in sight. So there should never be a token? Well, in some cases, especially in crypto, a token can be important too, when it serves an essential function for the thing that's being created, for example. So to take the obvious example there, Ethereum is also much closer to being a DAO than most token-governed DAOs. The ETH token exists to incentivize and reward maintenance of the blockchain. It's a great tool for that. Owning a bunch of ETH doesn't give you actual control over the Ethereum blockchain though. It might help you take over the validation, but Ethereum as a decentralized autonomous organization is much broader than that. And if someone did buy enough ETH to control the validators and make them do stuff people don't like, then Ethereum users would likely do a so-called user-activated soft fork and get rid of the bad players and move on. So with Ethereum, the token is still centralizing to some extent, but because it's not a governance token, it's not a deadly flaw like with most so-called DAOs. And it does achieve the goal of creating something that people can believe is going to get them rich if they buy it. With NFTs, it's pretty similar. If people are pitching you that the NFT means the project is decentralized, well, I don't think that's very accurate. What you want to look for in NFTs is also a form of genuine utility, where the existence of a token is actually justified, like in Ethereum. One way to determine if an NFT project has real utility is to look for the value link. This is essential to figure out if an NFT is a good long-term investment, because if the only way you can get rewarded by the project is if the founders are feeling generous that day, well, that's not a very good long-term investment. I've made a video about how to do that right here. GM and good luck.